The fact of having a choice and making a choice does not make it a feminist one. When we talk about these procedures as a way to achieve confidence, which is probably an argument you'll hear from opposition, that is an outright lie. We're ignoring the fact that it's still, in many cases, just a convenient scheme to make money from female insecurity. Understand that this is an industry that exploits, profits, and thrives off of insecurities, self-objectification, self-deprecation by the narrative set in society for women, that markets themselves to be able to fix your problems by making your nose smaller or your breasts bigger. The feminist movement is the single most important beacon that sheds light and protects women from injustices like discrimination, commodification, and inequality. We empower women, and this is a responsibility we must never stop doing. You're going to hear two arguments from proposition today. Firstly, how the industry uniquely endorses the commodification of women's bodies and therefore it is ethically and principally incorrect. Secondly, we're going to talk about the harms to the individual and how we as a movement better empower women under our side. Before that, a couple prongs have set up. I want to note that what proposition has to do in this debate is simply to prove that this industry is either principally illegitimate within the values of the movement or it is a vessel of harm towards the heart of this debate, which is women. This is strictly procedures for aesthetic purposes. We're not talking about breast cancer surgery. That is not a concern in this debate. In proposition, we would actively criticize and expose the controversial procedures or the cosmetic surgery industry in general, and turn to discourage women from opting into aesthetic surgeries and supporting this particular sector of the industry. This would most likely look like occasional social media outreach through posts. We would also heavily prioritize promoting body positivity messages and alternatives instead of these procedures. Note that we are not banning anything from anyone. We do not remove the individual right and liberty for people to do whatever they want. This is just us as a movement expressing on what we disagree on, much like how the feminist movement advocates for against anti-abortion laws, how the feminists don't agree with how the porn industry treats women, for example. That is what we're doing. The last thing to note is how common these procedures are in status quo. It is very different from 20 years ago, for example. It is very accessible to the extent where it has been normalized and even encouraged in a lot of countries like Korea, China, or even the United States. For example, how 90% of its consumers are women, how breast augmentation is the most successful branch in the industry, and how it is very easy for teenage girls to do eyelid surgery or get a nose job just with their parents' consent and their signature. First argument, then, how the industry uniquely endorses the commodification of women's bodies and therefore it is ethically and principally incorrect. I want to bring to you the 14-year-old girl sitting in her bedroom, looking in the mirror, counting down the days until she can get rid of the extra fat in her tummy that was probably always supposed to be there, wondering why her lips aren't as full as the girls in magazines and movies, hating the fact that boys make fun of her flat chest. And when she has these insecurities and she goes to the internet, she finds out that liposuction is a thing, that lip fillers exist, breast augmentation is perfectly safe, and that there's nothing wrong with wanting to change how you look in order to satisfy other people's perception of you. This is what the industry tells these girls. So why is this ethically incorrect? Firstly, this positioning enables the procedure to be trivialized and sold as a beauty treatment rather than a medical intervention or a major surgery. The cosmetic surgery industry sells breast augmentations as aids to increase self-confidence, self-esteem as fashion accessories. In this context, more women are thinking of their breasts or their features as fashion or status or feminizing objects which can be reshaped and changed at will. This is bad because if this trend continues, then our body parts will be increasingly come to be viewed as objects, as things, as commodities that can be owned and altered. There's an ideal shape, an ideal look, and this is how you get it. The second thing to say is that the fact that the target audience being prominently women shows how this industry stands for the very thing feminists hate: the over-sexualization, commodification, and objectification of women. This is playing on the burden society puts on women to look good according to its standards. Yes, we believe that every woman should have the right to choose and take ownership of their appearance. But I would say that at this point in time, women are succumbing to cosmetic surgery because they feel a pressure to it. Look at the narrative in society, how people say you're gonna have to do it. You're probably not gonna be a full-on general anesthesia, bone shaving, or muscle slicing, but almost definitely some injections in your face, very likely a session of fat melting in some areas, and possibly moving it to other parts that use plumping. And it may not be because you hate yourself or you fear aging or you're vain. You're going to get a cosmetic procedure for the same reason you wear makeup, because every other woman is, ultimately making every woman unconsciously succumbing into that terrible narrative. How do you weigh this argument? Firstly, at its core, when you actually think about it and you weigh the risks and benefits of obtaining informed consent for elective cosmetic surgery in otherwise healthy people, you are fixing something that was never physically wrong. We would go to the extent to say that when there is something wrong, it is a psychological narrative ingrained in their minds because of the toxic standard society feeds them. And there are many other alternatives to help these women out of that psychological toxic mindset. We do not think that surgery or physical alteration should be the first choice, nor would it be acceptable. Secondly, and this is crucial, our responsibility as the feminist movement is not only to empower women, but to make active efforts to discourage and object on forms of discrimination and blatant scams to our confidence, especially A, when it affects and touches the vast majority of women, and B, when you have the power, prestige, and platform to expose the evils of the industry, you have to do something. Very lastly is the very obvious fact that it is extremely unjustified and it is terrible to let these industries capitalize on the insecurities and the sufferings of these women. It is ethically incorrect to do anything but oppose. Second argument then, the harms to the individual and how we as a movement better empower women under our side. So let's answer the question. Does plastic surgery or aesthetic procedures actually help your self-esteem for the long run? The first thing to say is that this is a quick fix. It offers a euphoric high that soon wears off and sees them coming back for more. What's vital is the nature of cosmetic surgery intervention, which is addictive, and because we gradually lose sight of the person who once looked back at us in the mirror, all perspectives start to go. This creates a toxic mechanism of validation. People chase compliments, and once we start getting those, we want more of the Botox, more of the lip fillers. It doesn't actually give you that sigh of relief kind of validation. How when this becomes normalized and we're extra fixated on a particular physical trait, managing daily life and managing your expectations of yourself becomes difficult. The second thing to say is that most beauty ideals are arbitrary. Taking the case study of how common body dysmorphic disorder, or BDD, is when women held unrealistic expectations about the procedure and how they're going to look after the procedure. And it does not mean that these women are dumb or that they're naive. They are very justified to have these expectations because that is how it is marketed, right? So when they aren't satisfied, they often ask for multiple procedures on the same or other body features, and it creates a never-ending cycle of no satisfaction. The third thing to say is that women are more prone to make decisions to alter themselves under opposition. When we inject our faces with stuff, that doesn't come from the same place as putting on a colorful lipstick. We're navigating a new world. We're more conscious of our image, and when you have this normalization of plastic surgery, it's going to be much more easier to make that decision when it should not become an easy decision, especially because considering that the effects of plastic surgery are often irreversible, right? We believe that appearance should be an extension of who you are, not about trying to be someone you think society wants you to be. They may have perfectly reasonable explanations for wanting surgery, but we mustn't enthusiastically accelerate them towards the theater as a commercial commodity. And this is something we're actually able to do by opposing. So what do we actually get from opposing? The comparative under our side is firstly, as a movement, we actually help to guide women, to have that visceral and compelling impact, to hear from the movement, to tell them you don't have to conform to this, particularly for those of us in the gray area. Secondly, we push forward body positivity and self-love as the highest regard to any women. I think this means at the very least, we can make some women rethink their decision and rethink the way they approach aesthetic procedures. At best, this means that women are going to be able to find other alternatives that aren't as severely harmed to be able to make themselves feel satisfied in the long run. Lastly, what this does for the movement is as well as we can avoid a lot of the controversial criticisms regularly sent our way. We need a consistent, strong stance on what the society has done wrong to women and how to cope with that. You must not turn the blind eye to the spectrum of injustices for the false concept of acquiring more confidence by this industry. You must propose.